put like probably 8 miles behind me in 4 hours, solid pace, aid stations went well, and was really enjoying things. And then I started feeling that exact same hip pain that had derailed my half marathon. I thought, oh no. And then you start playing mental games. I'm like, oh, it's all in my head, right? It's like the sports psychology stuff. I'm just worried about it. No big deal. I guess I actually felt that starting at mile 6. And by mile 8, it became really clear that this was not in my head. This was a thing. So stopped for a second, stretched it out a little bit. I know my body well enough to know the difference between other types of hip pain and that type of hip pain. And I knew that that was a precursor to trouble. So stretched it out, it really had no effect. And by mile 10, I was in a pretty significant amount of pain. I picked up a stick and tried to use it as kind of like a low-tech roller for thigh and or just for quad. Didn't have any effect. I picked up like a round rock and like used it as a really low-tech Theragun. Didn't really have much of an effect. Tossed that to the side. And I remember right around like mile 10 or 11, right, like at this point, every step hurts. It's and it's not like discomfort. It's pain. I knew that it wasn't. I wasn't going to tear anything. This wasn't going to land me in PT. Dealt with this before. But I knew like this is just going to suck, man. Like, the pace. It's killing my pace. The pace that I'm suddenly running at means that I've got a solid 6 more hours of this. And do I want to do this or not? Because this isn't going to get better, it's going to get worse.
This is your host, Brendan, and you're listening to the Ordinary to Ultra podcast. This podcast is all about helping you run your first ultramarathon and beyond. Tune in to hear new and experienced ultra runners share how they got into running in the first place, what inspired them to run an ultra, training and race day tips, and the gripping story of their first ultramarathon. Prepare yourself to be inspired as you hear stories of grit, sometimes failure, but ultimately triumph when our guests finally cross the finish line. Few clothing companies out there have actual trail runners design their trail running clothes, and Territory Run Co. is the few. Brett Farrell, the founder of Territory Run Co., has been an avid trail runner for over 15 years, and he's designed some of the most thoughtful, functional, and just cool trail running clothing I've ever worn. 5-panel hats, t-shirts, sun shirts, shorts, socks, beanies, and more. They've got it all. I personally, though, love Territory Run Co.'s products for 2 reasons. First, I love their vibe. Most running brands are built around this performance is everything vibe, like work hard, sweat hard. That's fine, but we have enough of those. Territory Run Co. is built around the feeling that you get when you go out and try a new trail for the first time, or when you go on a trail running trip with friends. Second, Territory Run Co. builds their products for trail runners by trail runners. I have 2 of their hats, and they're my go-to running hats because they're incredibly light, super breathable, have super cool outdoorsy patterns, and I can throw them in the washing machine, which is super convenient. But what I love most about them is they have a little loop that goes around that floppy strap in the back of the hat that keeps it from flopping in front of your face if you're wearing it backwards, which is fantastic. Anyway, if y'all are in the market for some trail running hats or clothing, go check out Territory Run Co. And lucky for you, Brett has hooked me up with a coupon code for the listeners of this podcast. So head over to territoryrun.co and use the code ordinary to ultra 20 to get 20% off your first order. Both the website and the code are listed in the show notes of this episode. So go down to the show notes, copy the code, tap the link, and get some sick gear. All right, thanks for listening. Now back to the show. Hey, Nate, welcome to the Ordinary to Ultra podcast, my friend. I'm super happy to have you here, dude, and super excited to hear more about your story.
Thanks so much for having me on here, Brendan. I've been excited about this for a while since you asked me.
Sick. Well, I'm glad. To start things off, man, I'd love to have you tell us a little bit more about yourself, just like who you are. So like how old you are, where you live, what you do for work, what your family looks like, that sort of thing.
So I'm 37 for like 14 more
Righteous.
days or something like that.
Ooh,
And
nice.
40 is creeping up closer and closer and closer, but we're not there yet. So my wife and our 3 kids and I live out here in Wake Forest, North Carolina. We are
Nice.
native to California. My wife and I both graduated from the same 70-person high school out in rural California. Most people think city.
Wow.
We're
Yeah.
very rural, and we've kind of
South or
progressively moved
north?
east. Dead center, actually. So the
Center.
Central Coast, kind of
Okay.
a wine growing region. It's beautiful, and ain't no way I could ever afford a house out there.
Ah,
But yeah,
totally.
yeah. So we kind of have progressively moved east, and we're starting to run out of further places to go
East.
east. I think Outer
Yeah,
Banks and then Iceland would have to be the next move.
I guess.
But yeah, we're definitely adjusting to life on the East Coast. We've been out here for about 7 years or so.
Okay. That's a good amount of time.
Yeah. So we've
What'd
got
you say
3
you're doing
kiddos.
for
So we got
work?
yeah for work. So I'm actually a professor. I'm a professor at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest, and I'm a counseling professor. And kind of my specialty is working with couples who are caught in cycles of abuse and domestic violence. So I teach a
Okay.
lot of our trauma courses. I have my own private practice as well.
Oh,
So I
cool.
do a lot of kind of domestic violence intervention
Mm.
counseling. So I meet with a lot of kind of abusive men and women who've been abused. And we've got a team of about 6 there. And then I'm also the counseling minister at my church. So
My goodness.
life is full.
Yeah,
I make a living talking, bro. So that's the podcast is kind of fun, right? I've
we need to
written
talk about that offline because I love this and I'd love to make a living talking too.
yes, yeah. So I've written 3 books. The first was called "Help: Our Sex Life is Troubled by Past Abuse," which is
Hmm.
not a book that many people read in public, but was written for couples where one of them has suffered past abuse. And then
Hmm.
another one was a book on how do Christians understand the heart changing. And then the last one is about to come out at the beginning of next year, and it's titled "In Sickness and in Health: Walking with Your Loved One Through Chronic Pain and Illness." As my wife lives
Chronic.
pretty deeply inside the debilitating chronic pain and illness world, which we'll talk about more when it comes to the counseling journey and all. So I'm really blessed to
Yes.
do what I do. I feel like I don't feel like I work, right? Every day I wake up excited to teach my students, excited to counsel, excited to write. And that
Hmm.
part of life is just a huge blessing from the Lord.
That's fantastic, man. Good for you. And man, I mean, I'm just curious how many hours you think you put in working every week. I mean, you like it, so that's good.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Probably, I'm not a workaholic. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, really not a workaholic. A lot of my things kind of dovetail together. So there's probably some weeks that I'll work 60 hours a week and some I'll work 35. It just kind of depends on what's going on.
Yeah. Very cool. Pretty variable. So you're not, are you full time in the, in the, what'd you call it? In your
Professor?
professor, like in your
Hmm.
professor role? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm a full-time professor. I'll teach classes year-round, ranging from doctoral classes
Hmm.
down to undergraduate classes, and that's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool, man. Well, thanks for sharing about you. Um, Before we get into like your running history, a question I've been asking towards the beginning lately is, when do you fit in your running? Are you typically a running in the morning person, an afternoon, evening, anytime? What do you do?
I would love to run in the mornings. but
Yeah.
I married this thing called a night owl.
Oh
And
no.
I actually, she laughed at me. So I'm on the East Coast, right? So as we're recording
Yeah.
this, it's like 10 o'clock right now. And she laughed, saying, "You're doing a lot of things in the evenings, late in the evenings now." And I said, I just finally decided after 11 years of marriage, I cannot beat you, so I might as well join you in this late night stuff. So, um,
Dang.
yeah, so I'll do two things. One, I'll kind of cut out from work at 4 o'clock and run until 5, and then come home. Or I'll run after the kids go to bed. Um, and then because I have just a really flexible job, when I'm really deeper into a training cycle, need to put some miles together, I'll actually drop our 3-year-old in the jogging stroller, and Friday mornings we'll go out for a 3-hour run together or such. So I've
Yeah.
got logged a lot of stroller miles.
Nice. Yes, that's fantastic. Get your long runs in on Friday with your child. Do you find that that's a bonding experience? Like, are you
Yeah, it
chatting a
is.
lot
Like,
or
she'll come and tell
yeah,
me, "Daddy, won't go run with you." And
yeah,
I saw, I saw on Facebook one of these things, "Tell me you're a runner without saying you're a runner," and someone
yeah.
put my 3-year-old foam rolls, and I'm like, "Yep, that's exactly right." She'll have her little foam roller. She'll foam roll with me,
Yeah,
and
that's funny.
my older two boys will run 5Ks with me sometimes as well, and so we try and turn it
Nice.
into kind of a family thing as much as we can. A lot of times during the summer, we'll go down to the local track, and I'll dictate to them kind of what their workout is for the day, and then they'll just play soccer in the center, and I'll just keep running around the track.
Oh, nice. That's really cool, man. Is your wife hopping on the no? Is your wife hopping on the train
Yeah.
with running, or can't she
So my
maybe
wife
with her?
used to be my training buddy. We did a lot
Yeah.
of training together, and yeah, she was always incredibly active, very talented high school athlete, and was the kind of person who'd go run a half marathon on a day because she could, type person. But about 3 years ago, she had a post childbirth surgery that went awry, and it's really kind of crippled her body in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, and so this is something that just is a me and the kids thing, and
Yeah.
we. It's sad. It's sad that that's not a possibility. But she's
Hmm.
also the kind of person who's really happy for me to continue doing something that I love, even if it reminds her that she can't do it. And there's certainly some wisdom that we have to have there, but I'm really grateful for her support.
That is awesome. I mean, that's awesome that she can support you in that. And man, it's too bad that that happened. And but man, what a trooper. um, awesome. Well, thanks for explaining. Yeah, how you fit in the running when and with your family. That's really cool. Getting your kids into it. Um, well, to get to the beginning of things, Nate, I'd love to ask you what got you running in the first place, and when was that?
Sure. I feel like I should preface it by saying I'm a terrible athlete. Um,
Okay.
so rewind back to high school, and I was the statistician on our football team because I was 5'4" and 120 pounds, right? Um, and I think I'm the only person in my high school's history to have a 0% batting average in varsity baseball and a 0% field goal percentage for varsity basketball. Like, I just, I'll work hard, but I'm not very talented. And, and so running kind of a little bit of distance was something I was always a little bit better at, but not great. So I remember in college, go out, run 5 miles here, a few times a week, enjoyed doing that. I had some significant health challenges in college and actually lost the ability to really run for about 10 years. And I remember I was in grad school, so I would have been about 27, and was just recognizing that that physically the trajectory I was on was not great. I was starting to lose a little bit of the battle of the bulge and start putting on some pounds and not really liking that. Didn't like how I felt. And so I remember I went out for a run and I ran like a mile, and it was like a 12-minute, 30-second mile, and I felt like I was going to die. And I thought, how on earth did I get here? And the answer of how I got there was working 55 hours a week for AT&T as a salesperson, and then studying Greek and Hebrew and theology and counseling and, doing nothing physical. So kind of decided that I needed to try and make some changes. And, I have some metabolic conditions that make fueling a little bit of a challenge. And so really just started experimenting. And it was probably a 5-year ramp from couch to running a 5K. Because I had to figure out how to do the nutrition, the recovery type stuff. My body doesn't recover very well, and all. I'm a pretty extreme hypoglycemic, which just doesn't do well with, kind of short burst athletics. And so,
what does that mean again?
So, really, really low blood sugar, chronic low blood sugar. So, I have to eat a ton of protein. I have to really be careful of how much just carbs I put in my system, which makes distance running an adventure. On I've done 2 ultras, both of them. I shotgunned a pouch of tuna at mile 17. I kind of wind up eating some non-traditional foods. It took a long time to figure out. Yeah. So, probably about 3 years ago, I was running maybe like 10 miles a week and just feeling really awesome about it.
Dang. Nice.
And then my wife's health fell apart, and there were some really significant workplace stresses that happened, and really began investing a little bit more in running as a way of stress management. As someone who does counseling for a living, I know that exercising 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week, has the same efficacy rate of working on mild to moderate depression as the best SSRIs that are on the market. So I thought, I really need to do this, and I found that the more that I actually pushed myself, the more I liked who I was as a human. And set my sights on doing a half marathon. I'm like, that's the bucket list item. And did it and thought, well, how much further can I go? I don't know. And eventually I'd always had an interest in ultra running. It seemed like an interesting sport, right? And if we're honest, it produces some of the best documentaries on YouTube out of any sport out there. Like, it's really tough to have a compelling bowling documentary, I think. But like you're doing it in the mountains of Utah and Arizona. I mean, I can dig that. So began watching some of those and began understanding that the sport was a little bit different than I thought it was, that walking was an acceptable portion of it, that it's about covering the distance and not the speed. And what finally actually did it for me to click me over from running road half marathons over to trail ultras was actually last fall. I had been training for like 6 months to set to PR a half marathon. I had 2 different races lined up, and my kids got me sick on the first one, so I scratched it. Kids got me sick on the second one, scratched it. Got sick on the third one, which was, one of the other races converted into a different one in the series. And I was so frustrated over the fact that I just wound up throwing away, 6 months of track work and all sorts of stuff. I've got little kids in the school system. I just said, you know what, like, shoot, if in that type of running, walking is more acceptable, I can always just walk a little bit longer and it'd be fine. versus, different people are different places. I know I can run a full 13.1 miles. And so it felt like a little bit more failure to run a slower pace. So that's actually what made me push me towards doing ultras was kids getting sick.
Yeah. Dang. I feel that. And I bet a lot of people listening to this will feel that. Like, yeah, your kids just bringing
You can just block
stuff
out like September
home.
through February, and it's like this is the sick season.
Dude, even lately, there's been some weird stomach stuff going around, and we go to church, and then everyone at church gets sick. The same thing. It's like, dang.
I mean, you've got one who's still in the I stick everything in my mouth phase. So once you get out of that phase, it's a little bit better, but not much for a while.
Yeah, dude, that's real. I'm curious, you mentioned the running documentaries and such. Is that how you first learned about ultra running? Like when you first figured out that was a thing?
The first time I heard of it was I read Dean Carnazzi's Ultramarathon Man in college.
Oh, okay.
So that would have been like 2007.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, that's insane. And that sounds awesome. So it had kind of been on the back burner for a long time. But again, there was just some physical things that made it so I couldn't do it. And I've been a lot healthier in my 30s than I was in my 20s, which I'm really thankful for. And that opened up the possibility of doing it. I'd say, here's interestingly enough, the runner, kind of contemporary runner who really piqued my interest in it is Sally McRae. I don't know if you've seen her stuff, some of her interviews with Nick Bare and others, but her story connected with what I do professionally, because she grew up in a home with an abusive father. And I stumbled across one of her interviews talking about her life growing up. Her mom died of cancer when she was 16. Her mom was kind of her protector in the home. And Sally wound up going to a Bible college, which is very close to a college that I went to. There was a lot of kind of parallels in terms of some of the, not family background, but what I do professionally. And that was kind of the gateway drug to listening to more and watching more. And, now my YouTube suggestions are nothing but that.
It's funny you say that. Yeah. Yep. Definitely half of my YouTube feed is ultra running.
Mm-hmm. I want to know what the other half is, though.
Other half? Well, that changes. It just changes based on the time. But I don't know if anybody listening to this plays video games. Hopefully not, because we're all like out in the wild. But I play video games for fun from time to time. So right now I got Elden Ring in my feed. It's a video game that they just dropped a new DLC for, so that's in my feed. What else is in my feed?
I know this is audio, so people can't see it, but I'm doing the basic smile and nod that you do when you have no idea what someone's talking about.
Yeah. That's good. See, I'm glad.
I played an hour of Smash Brothers with my kids tonight, and I won every round. They're always like, "Dad, why are you so good at this?" Like, because I played this for 10,000 hours growing up, kid. Like,
did you really? Did you play the GameCube one, or even was it
64?
N64?
Yeah, 64 on GameCube.
Dang, that's a fun game. Switch is fantastic. Well, yeah. There's my YouTube feed exposed.
My other half is NASCAR. So
NASCAR.
Yeah, I grew up going
you
to
should
tracks.
Get into NASCAR.
I grew up going to tracks with my grandparents. So I'm like a I'm a Californian semi-hippie who loves ultra running and then NASCAR. Doesn't make sense, but you are who you are.
Yeah, you are who you are. So you mentioned the half marathons, and let's see, how long ago was your first half? Did you say like 3 years ago?
Let's see, it would have been 2 years ago. that I did the
2
first
years
half.
ago?
I signed
Awesome.
up. It was called the Run the Valley half marathon. And I signed up like 2 weeks before it. It was like 32 degrees at the
Nice.
start. It was an hour and a half away.
Oh,
I'd run, like, my training for it had been like, I'll run a half marathon as fast as I can, pushing this jog stroller. So I had no idea what I was doing in terms of training plan. It was like, well, you just go farther and faster every time you run. I did
and
no
faster?
research of like what this race was. I was very surprised to discover an 800-foot climb in the middle of it.
Oh. Oh.
Um, yeah,
And
up.
one
Yep,
800-foot climb.
yep, one 800-foot
Oh,
climb.
gal.
So I ran up the entire thing, and I thought, and I
With a
passed a lot of
stroller?
people. I lost, not with a stroller on that one,
Oh,
no,
okay.
but I passed a lot of people. And then I realized that I nuked my quads, and every single one of them passed me coming down. And it was your stereotypical show up and blow up, right? And then I ran
Yeah.
a second half marathon to kind of redeem myself at
Okay.
a little bit later that year. So I think,
So that was 2022?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
my half marathon pace, I think my best one's around 154. So 845
Nice
miles.
job.
So it's not, it's just,
Sub
it's
2.
seriously middling, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've done some work, you can tell, but I'm definitely not a speedy fellow.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I haven't done a road half. My first half was a trail half. So I
Gotcha.
don't know. I can't really compare. There was climbing. Yours had climbing too, but anyway. What I wanted to get at is, when did you? What led you to sign up for your ultra then? So you finished these halves, and then like
Mm-hmm.
what happened up until you signed up for this ultra?
Well, I lost the 3 half marathons last fall.
Yeah, yeah.
And the last one, I did it. And my IT band locked up, and I wound up just peg legging half of it. I missed a turn,
Ooh.
and I wound up doing 4 miles of single track instead of 4 miles of groomed trail. It was a horrible experience, and but I finished. It just became a can I finish this thing by the cutoff time, and
Yeah.
and after that, I don't know. It became time to make a change, and I'd always wanted to do an ultra. And I've always had a little bit of kamikaze in me, I guess. Going back, like, you look back throughout history, it's like there's just a little bit of like, that may not be smart, but I'm gonna do it,
Yeah.
type thing. And so it kind of was to use a phrase, go big or go home. Like, I'm gonna challenge myself. There weren't really. It felt like I could do like a marathon, but there weren't necessarily trail marathons, and I wanted to do something trail in my area. And there's a pretty low cost. It's called Mountains to Sea 50K. Here they had a 12-mile version and a 50K version. And I thought, well, let's do the 50K version, and we'll just see what happens. I mean, the cutoff time was, at the time, I thought it was fairly generous. Wound up being not so. And decided to embark on trying to figure out how to train for it.
Okay. When did you say this was? Ish.
So that one was in April.
That one was in
Of
April,
this
and
year.
you decided to
And I decided my training plan started January 1st.
January 1st, very beginning of the year. Solid.
Mm-hmm.
And you signed up for it in December?
So when did I sign up for it? Yeah, I signed up in like December. I remember signing up for it in the drop-off line of my kid's school because I wasn't sure whether it was one of these races that sold out fast or not. And so
yeah.
it was like, it opens at 7:30 in the morning on this day. And so I sat there refreshing my phone until the registration thing. I dropped the kids off, pulled off to the side of the road, signed up, and then realized oh, yeah, it's not that type of race. There was plenty of spots. but
But you
signed
were
up for it,
there.
and then tried to start mapping out a training plan that started January 1st.
Sick.
I'm really thankful that one of a student at my school actually is a really talented trail runner. He won the Georgia Death Race a couple of years ago. As several of just kind of the bigger races here in the Southeast region, he's placed very well in. And so we struck up a friendship talking about an obscure Dutch Reformed theologian that both of us appreciate, because we're in that kind of pastoral theology kind of realm, and talk a lot about trail running. And I'm better at the theology because I've got the PhD in it, and he's way better at the trail running. And so we are able to help each other in each other's fields of not quite as strongness. So he helped me put together a training plan and kind of coached me through some of it. That's one thing I've really appreciated about the ultra community, is that it's just really giving and it's really friendly, and there aren't too many questions that are treated like stupid questions.
Preach. Yeah, that's true. And that's awesome that you had a buddy that you could connect with, even professionally and for funsies, doing the trail running. What a guy, helping you out with the training plan. What did that training plan look like? What did your training look like?
Yeah,
starting in January.
So I grabbed the training plan off of Innovate's website and then just mixed it up to actually match the days that I had the flexibility to run on. So Fridays became my long runs. And I followed the plan, but at the same time, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea about there's different blocks that you do. Like you do a mountain block to train for hills, you do a speed block. It didn't have any of that. It was just run this distance at this pace for this time. And it'd be at your 5K pace or at your 3-hour pace. And be like, well, I've never run 3 hours. What do I think at my slow? That's what that pace is, right? And I tried to do as much work on the actual trail that I was going to be running on. I'm thankful to live live 20 minutes away from where the turnaround point is.
Oh, nice.
Which is a benefit of choosing something really local. And there's only 2 legit trails in the area, but that's enough to work on it. So I was really, really bad at running trails at the beginning. Just not sure of my footing, tripped and fell a lot.
Do you have trail shoes?
Yeah, I do.
You did? Nice.
But just the foot placement, looking for obstacles.
Lifting up your feet maybe. I was talking to a couple a few weeks ago. It's like we just weren't lifting our feet up enough, and we were just tripping on every root and rock.
Yeah. In North Carolina, it's all really rooty and rocky. So the road hazards abound. So the training plan, I just kind of let it guide me, and it typically had one speed session every week, and then a long run, and then a bunch of easy runs, and kind of escalated the distances with step backs, every 4 weeks or so. So it was certainly doable, and I wound up having that training plan. I wouldn't have done as much training as I did without the plan, because there were plenty of nights where it's I don't feel like doing this, but the piece of paper says I need to run 6 miles tonight. So I have to run 6 miles tonight because I'm a professor and I write syllabi, and people have to obey the paper. And so I am hardwired to obey the paper.
You feel that in your soul.
Yeah, that was really
that's funny.
kind of the mindset. So I did the majority of it the way that it said to do it, because that's what it said to do.
Man, that's awesome. And it's cool that it had the speed work in there and some different types of workouts. What do you think your peak mileage was when you hit like
It was
your most
32.
miles a week?
Yeah,
32.
32.
Yeah,
Hmm.
solid. And you were running like 4 days a week, three,
It
four,
was
five,
5 to 6.
5 to 6. Okay,
Yeah.
small, like probably pretty small chunks,
Yeah, it was
and then some
mainly
big
this
chunks.
plan had like I mean there was one big day uh every 2 weeks. So I think the longest training run I did was 22 miles. Um
Nice.
yeah, which was incredibly helpful. So I remember my first really long one I did on the trail. I knew how to manage food. I knew how to manage water, but I didn't know how to manage salt. And so I really dealt with electrolyte deficiency. And I felt awful coming home. And it took like a week to recover. And I remember texting my buddy, who, is a pretty accomplished trainer, like, what's wrong with me? He's like, well, are you taking salt tablets? What are these salt tablets you speak of? And those really changed the game for me. Um,
Yeah.
Actually, monitoring that third category there was really important. As I was just eating a lot of granola bars, and some of them it doesn't necessarily have any salt in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there wasn't, and then I mean, other than those really long runs, I'd say the longest run that they had me do was like 6 miles, just an easy 6 mile pace. So it definitely loaded the mileage on the long runs.
Mm-hmm. Good for you with the figuring out the salt tablets, though. Figuring out, electrolytes, sodium. Do you typically take salt tablets instead of like a drinkable or something like that?
Yeah, I've started using Tailwind, which is nice. Um, it actually allows for kind of gentle calories on the stomach too.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that the salt tablets just kind of give that a boost and allow me to just drink water when I want to and still get the electrolytes in that I need.
Nice. Okay, interesting.
I've
I may try that
also,
sometime, separating it out.
yeah, it gives a little bit more control over things.
Yeah.
Um, I know we're talking mainly about the first ultra that I did, the one that I just did, um, last Saturday. It had a starting temperature of 98 degrees, and so it started at 6 p.m. So it was 2 hours of running in the heat before it turned night. And what I discovered actually is I had Tailwind in my my pack. I use the bladder. I don't have the little bottles. And what happened was I needed to drink more fluids, but having just Tailwind mixed in with it really made it too heavy. I felt really nauseous because I needed fluid, but was taking in too many calories and
Yep.
electrolytes in a lot of ways. And so having it split out, I wound up doing that the second half of the race, where I just filled it up with water and then would take the salt tablets.
I feel that when I was running my marathon, I had my salt. I mean, I had the little pouches in front of me, in my vest, and both of them were full of liquid IV. Same thing as Tailwind.
Yeah.
There's sugar in there. There's sodium in there, 500 milligrams. I don't remember how much sugar, and also water. So it's like all three. I was also taking squeeze gels for energy, but I felt like I was having so much sugar and like I needed the sugar, but I just wanted to get a drink of water.
Yeah.
Like separated from the everything. It just sounded nice, but I didn't have that. I just had a bunch of sugar juice.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
worked,
I agree with you.
I appreciate that, separating it out.
Just it gives me a little bit more control over things. I mean, especially the really hot one. Like I didn't want a ton of calories, right? Like everything sat heavy. So So being able to split it out helped me.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for sharing that with the electrolytes. So we talked about your training. Maybe I'll ask you this before we get into the story of your ultramarathon, your first 50K. Tell me, do you usually run your training miles alone? Do you sometimes run with a buddy? I know you mentioned running with
Mm-hmm.
your daughter, I think, some
Yeah.
Fridays, but do you run with anybody else or
Yeah, it's kind
typically
of
training
split out.
alone?
So
Yeah.
I have one running buddy who actually just finished his first 100-miler. And
Okay.
we would do, like, on Wednesdays when my kids are at their church youth event, we do
Hmm.
about 5 miles at the local park.
Oh, cool.
And then on Fridays, I have a friend, it's actually my boss from my work. He would typically run about 10 miles with me, and then I would run the rest myself on the long Friday runs. And then the
Hmm.
other days, I'm usually doing it by myself after dark around our neighborhood or on the trail near my house. I actually built a trail in my backyard. We have about 2.5 acres. And so I'll go out there and train a bunch by myself as well.
Nice. Backyard ultra. I want to hear a story
Yeah,
of
it's
you
like a quarter
doing
mile.
50
It's
doing
like a
50
quarter
miles
mile
in your
total.
quarter mile.
So yeah, so that'd be 200 laps, which I would
Yeah,
go
let's do
insane.
it.
I would go insane.
Those people amaze me. I
Yeah,
think
I'm
I would
doing
too.
one in September.
Oh, well,
Like
you're those people.
yeah. So
Bigger loop than that, probably, though. 2
yeah,
miles, maybe.
it's a 4.17,
There you go.
kind of just the standard distance.
Yeah. You'll go less crazy in that one. That's good.
Hmm.
Well, thanks for sharing. Yeah. I find it curious what people do if they train with people most of the time, if they really enjoy that, or if they go solo or do a mix. I prefer a mix myself. I think
Yeah.
it's fun to meet other people training and go out on the trails with buds, but I also love my alone time to
Hmm.
think or listen to an audiobook.
Yep.
It's
What's your book of
precious.
choice, man? What you got
A
spinning right
book of
now?
It's been the same thing since my podcast listeners are probably all like, we've heard that before. I listen to Brandon Sanderson when I run right now. He's a fantasy
Okay.
author.
I
Do you
know
know
the
him?
name, but I
Yeah.
haven't ever read anything
Okay,
by
cool.
him.
Well, that's good that you've heard the name. Yeah. If you're interested in
On
getting into any fantastic fantasy, he is
Okay. I like the
unbeatable.
genre. On the one that I just did on Saturday for about 10 miles, I listened to Strider taking the hobbits from Bree to Rivendell. Like that was the backdrop for mile 18 to 28.
Like in the Lord of the Rings, the book, or as like
Yep.
a different book? Yeah,
Yeah.
in the Lord of the
Yeah. Yeah.
Rings.
Yeah. Like the Fellowship of the Ring.
That's awesome, man. I haven't read the Lord of the Rings somehow, but I don't know. Would that be a good listen? I hear mixed things about the book because of how it is formatted. Like a
It's old school, and
yeah, I don't know.
yeah, it's old school. But
It's old
I
school.
really appreciate Tolkien a lot.
Yeah, I should give it a shot. Nice. Cool. Before we get into your story too, I want to ask you, do you have any one piece of gear other than your shoes that you feel like totally changed your running game for you? Like, this totally made my life so much better when I started using this thing.
It's not necessarily a piece of gear, but it was a mindset shift about gear.
Okay.
So I remember being in academy sports trying to figure out whether I actually wanted to drop $35 on a pair of Adidas running shorts. Like, this is before the half marathons. And I was just running in whatever like basketball shorts I had. And then I wound up going to REI and actually buying like some John G running shorts and one of their just running shirts. And what that made me realize is that it's better to spend a little bit more money on something that is really quality, that doesn't come from like a big box department store, like Dick's or Academy or something like that, but actually get stuff that's designed by a company that's invested in your actual sport and not just it's a thing they do. So I love saving money more than I love spending money. And so I just get all my stuff and they slash the prices because last season's deals, and I use a lot of John G and Rabbit stuff. So it's the higher quality, but still not spending too much money. And that really has reduced a lot of chafing, and it's higher quality. It actually wicks sweat better. It holds up longer. It's lighter. So I think that shift of saying, look, this is like, if I'm going to spend 7.5 hours running on a Saturday and covering 50K, that should be worth spending a little bit of money on.
Yeah. Great mindset. I mean, you could probably get by in your regular stuff, but I love John G. Love John G. Their stuff's their shorts. I'm not gonna buy their shirts. I don't need their bougie shirt. There's nothing special, I don't think, really about their shirts compared to any other moisture wicking t-shirt. But their shorts, I got those. Their transit short and their multi short, like made for long distance trail running or ultra running, right? They got pockets everywhere on the waist belt. That's fantastic. You can stick your gels up in those things or like whatever else you want to stick. There's pockets all over this thing and they stick tight to you, so not bouncing around, which is awesome. And they got the liner. It comes with a liner, so if you dig that, it's like a short, flowy short, and then the liner. Maybe you have the same shorts, but I'm explaining to everyone listening. And then you can stick your cell phone in the liner short pocket. It like suctions your phone to your leg, and it's not bouncing. In my experience, anyway. I love those shorts. I have 2 pairs, and I just run in those 2 pairs, and I just wash them, and I just have 2 pairs of shorts because they cost money. But I agree. Like buying a couple nice pairs of shorts, anyways, they really help reduce the chafing. Yeah, I'm all about those John G shorts, man.
Those are solid. Yeah, I have the AFO ones, which I don't love as much. I really like their shirts a lot. Maybe I'm more bougie than you. I don't know. But yeah, I find that they wick stuff. They don't trap water as much as some of the other brands. But that's just my experience.
Cool. I'm a sweaty person, so I could probably benefit from that. I'm a sweaty runner. I'm also a salty runner. Maybe weird TMI stuff, but I was talking to other runners, and some people, when they finish a run, even a relatively shorter, like 6-mile run or something, when I finish runs like that, I've got salt crystallized all over my face. Some people don't do that. I definitely do. Weird stuff.
Yeah, there's so many different ways our bodies react to this, aren't there?
Yeah, I get all the salt out on my face and on my hats. I have to wash them all the time. And I think I may have to take more electrolytes because I just tend to sweat more salt out maybe than some people. I don't know. But thank you for sharing that tip. And I definitely recommend to anyone listening that maybe you haven't bought a pair of running shoes yet, dedicated running or trail running shoes. That is definitely worth spending the money on. It'll change the game.
Just by last season's Like
Yeah, totally.
I
REI, get the ones on sale.
REI or Amazon,
Amazon.
right? Like I buy the 1 or 2 year old models that are just as good. It's just a little different variation. You can save a lot of money that way. Like it doesn't have to be crazy expensive,
Yeah,
but it's
well
better to
said.
buy
But
better shoes from last year than to buy the new model. How am I trying to say this? Let me try the sentence again. It's better to buy like a pair of $75 shoes from last year that were 150 than to buy the newest $75 shoe.
there you go. Well said.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there
like
we go.
your regular old tennis shoe
Mm-hmm.
is just totally different. Getting
Mm-hmm.
a real deal running shoe.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay. We're done with the tangent. I appreciate it, you sharing though, and hopefully that's helpful to listeners that are getting into this. But let's hear the story of your first 50K. You put in the training. You were doing like max 32 miles, I think, a week, and
Mm-hmm.
so you put in like just enough to really, I think, be ready. Some people put in like 40, 50 miles. I think it's overkill, but you were putting in enough to be ready for this thing.
Yeah.
So let's hear the story of it. So like from the night before, like how much sleep you got to
Yeah.
how you
See,
felt in the
see,
morning and
Brandon,
like the
we have
breakfast.
to back up 1 week from my ultra
Okay,
marathon
that's good
story,
too.
though. Okay, we got to
Okay,
back
but
up 1 week.
before you do that, I'll just like get all my spiel out. Just give me as much detail as you can, especially about race day, right? But yeah, you can
Yeah,
back up to a week
sure.
before if some stuff changed. Any notable moments that happened during the race?
Yeah, absolutely.
Up till you get to the finish line. But okay, take it away. Thanks, Nate.
Mhm. So, week before, Thursday, the week before, I'm scrolling through Facebook Marketplace and I see that someone in my city is selling 750 large ornamental rocks for their yard. And we're in need of these types of rocks. They weigh anything between 15 and 40 pounds a piece.
It's a
according
lot
to
of
according
rocks.
to the advertisement. And so I start talking with them and we buy them. And it turns out that they were a little bit off in their estimates. There were a lot more than 750, and some of those suckers were like 60 to 70 pounds each. We wound up taking 13 of my pickup trucks full of rocks back to our house. So that's picking them up and loading them in and then unloading them.
Yeah. Oh
Which
my
means I
gosh.
destroyed my hips doing this the week before. It was astronomically stupid. But I have a really cool rock wall in my yard now, and I still got the finisher's medal. It just became a lot harder to get there. Remember the kamikaze comment. So yeah, but it was pretty cool. So I did that, and I mean, just don't do that kind of thing, because it really messed up the race a lot of ways. And yeah, so the rest of the week, I tried to take care of my body, a lot of stretching, kind of light running, that type of thing. But I went in with a fairly tight lower body. And there was one thing I was really concerned about. But I should say, but it wasn't bad, right? I mean, I could tell there's a little bit more fatigue, but I felt solid at the start line. There's one thing I was really concerned about, and that's that the last half marathon that I had done, I think I mentioned before, like my right hip kind of locked up, causing a lot of IT band pain to the point that it was like just hobbling. And I actually finished last in that half marathon, like 3 minutes before the cut line. Which I was proud of myself that I actually finished, but it was 8 miles of peg legging this thing. And the hip hadn't bothered me at all during the training runs for the whole 50K prep. And Yeah. So that was a concern that I had in the back of my head of like, is the last time I raced this happened, is this going to happen again? So,
Mm.
night before, certainly a little jittery, didn't get awesome sleep, but I got enough sleep the night before that. And I mean, the people who do this professionally say that that's what's most important is the 2 nights before sleep, not the night before sleep. I'm not sure if everybody just says that because it makes them feel better, but they make money doing this and I don't. So we'll take their word for it. But yeah, I mean, drove out there, got there like an hour early. It was only 35 minutes from my house, and I had prepped my drop bag the night before, so just really did everything I could to make it really smooth and streamlined. I wasn't sure how much food I was gonna need on this thing, so I totally overpacked. I think I had like 8 granola bars with me and a pair of pancakes with peanut butter smashed in between them, and a couple pouches of tuna, and my 2 liters of water, and it's probably the equivalent of like a Union soldier gets issued all this gear when he goes off to war and discards half of it because he realizes that it's pointless and he has to haul it around while marching, for the next 6 months. It's probably similar to that.
Nice.
But kind of towed the start line, and honestly, my goal was to finish. I'd never run that far before, and they yelled go, and we started, and I got caught. The race was 98% single track. Started at 7
Okay.
a.m. It was a beautiful day.
What about your ups and downs?
It's very much kind of up and down. So it was 4,000 feet of elevation change, and the longest climb was 100 feet. So
dang! So it's just tons of hills.
Outside of a couple bridges, there wasn't a single flat step on this thing.
Dang.
Which actually was kind of nice because I just hiked the uphills, and there were a ton of them, and then run the downhills and the occasional flat spots. But it really it broke it up for me where I could have a strategy to how am I going to manage my energy on this thing. So I tried to kind of hang back and start towards the back of the pack because I wasn't sure how I was going to do. This is number one. But with it being single track, what that meant is I was kind of forced to run the pace of the people around me. Everyone says run your own race, but at the same time, it's also like, don't be a jerk. Don't be the ultra running equivalent of the person who's doing 40 miles an hour in the left lane on the freeway. Right. So I got caught in a pack that was just running faster than they probably should have, which meant that I was running faster than I should have. And put some fairly swift miles down for the first couple miles before things strung out. Knew I was running a little fast, but I mean, at the same time, I got stuck. And so, like, honestly, it was a couple hours of a lot of fun. I put like probably 8 miles behind me in 4 hours, solid pace. Aid stations went well. And was really enjoying things. And then I started feeling that exact same hip pain that had derailed my half marathon. And I thought, oh no. And then you start playing mental games. I'm like, oh, it's all in my head, right? It's like the sports psychology stuff. I'm just worried about it. No big deal. I guess I actually felt that starting at mile 6. And by mile 8, it became really clear that this was not in my head. This was a thing. So stopped for a second, stretched it out a little bit. I know my body well enough to know the difference between other types of hip pain and that type of hip pain. And I knew that was a precursor to trouble. So stretched it out, it really had no effect. And by mile 10, I was in a pretty significant amount of pain. I picked up a stick and tried to use it as kind of like a low-tech roller for thigh and or just for quad. Didn't have any effect. I picked up like a round rock and like used it as a really low-tech Theragun. didn't really have much of an effect, tossed that to the side. And I remember right around like mile 10 or 11, right, like at this point, every step hurts. And it's not like discomfort, it's pain. Um, I knew that it wasn't, I wasn't going to tear anything. This wasn't going to land me in PT. I've dealt with this before. But I knew like, this is just going to suck, man. like, the pace, it's killing my pace. The pace that I'm suddenly running at means that I've got a solid 6 more hours of this. And do I want to do this or not? Because this isn't going to get better, it's going to get worse. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier was that my wife lives in a lot of chronic pain and illness. So she went from being someone who was very, very active to, there was actually an 18-month period where she didn't leave our house because she couldn't. She probably lives in like level 5 to level 7 pain every day. And still a mommy to 3 really active kids, the oldest of which is 9. She has a bunch of different stuff layered on top of each other health issues. One of the things is she suffers from really debilitating migraine headaches as well. Like at one point in our marriage, a good month was she'd have 25 migraines a month. I would just be down for the count 25 days a month. And now like there's days that she wakes up and she's like, my legs go numb every time I sit, or it feels like I have stabbing pains all over the place and doctors don't quite know what's gone wrong, but she lives in a lot of pain. And one of the things that people talk about is you have to find your why in running these things, because there's going to come moments in the race when the question becomes, why am I doing this? And going into this race, I knew that one of my whys was that this race was going to hurt, but I figured it might open a window into a little bit of being able to understand my wife's daily experience. And there's a big difference. And that difference is that I can stop anytime I want and she can't, because for her to wake up is to be in pain. The only time she's typically not in pain is when she's asleep. But some of those choices are the same, right? Where there's the choice of how are you going to respond to pain. And so I figured that this ultra was going to hurt, and I was going to experience something new for me, which is choices of how to manage pain. I didn't expect it to be like this. I expected it to be like, your legs start getting stiff and hurting around the 20-mile mark, because they just do. But all of a sudden, this was 6 hours and not, 2-3 hours of stiffness. This was every single step. It felt like getting stabbed in the side of the knee. And kind of at that moment, I just realized, like, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop. And one of the reasons is I need to understand more of Kate's experience. And also, like, I mean, am I really going to stop? Sure, the pain would stop, but it'll stop anyways when I'm done. Can I not really endure this for 6 hours? And I started doing some experimentation, and I discovered that it hurt the exact same to run fast that it did to run slow. And so I really hammered the middle section of that course. I ran my fastest miles between mile 10 and I'd say probably mile 13 to mile 23. Was running probably about 12-minute miles, which is pretty good for that consistent elevation change and hiking a bunch of the uphills. I remember getting to the aid station, and I was like, or the turnaround point at the 15.5 mile mark, and like the power plant felt totally fine, but my right leg was just in real rough shape, and I knew that it was going to lock up on me. So I wanted to get as many miles under my belt as I possibly could before it locked up. So that's why I hammered that course so hard. And around the mile 23 mark is when it really locked up. So what that looked like is anytime I stopped, like at an aid station, it would get stiff to the point that I couldn't actually bend it. So, stop, get water, get some Gatorade in me, eat. I probably ate like 6 oranges all total if you add them all up, the aid stations. Eat some orange slices, get a little food in me, and then just like straight peg leg it for about a quarter mile, and then it would loosen up enough that I could bend it again, and would run until I couldn't stand the pain anymore, and then would hike for a quarter mile, and then go back to running again. And I remember in the middle of that, there was this pack of 3 dudes who were running together, and they ran past me. And given the words they were saying, which I'm not allowed to say as a Baptist seminary professor, it was pretty clear that they weren't in great shape either, but they were moving a lot better than I was. The theme of it basically is we need to find a better hobby than this. This is stupid. But what I did is I kind of hopped onto the back end of their 3-person train and just let them do the thinking for me. So when they hiked, I hiked. And when they ran, I ran. And I probably chased them like that for 3-4 miles. And before eventually, I just couldn't keep up with them because of the pain. And then they disappeared around the shrubbery. That's the wrong term. That's way too manicured. The North Carolina scrub stuff, and I never saw them again. And really that pattern just kind of continued for the next 10 miles to finish the race off. And what consistently ran through my head was I knew that I needed to run some sections to meet the cutoff time, which was 8 hours. My plan was to finish in 7. I was on pace to finish it easily by that if it wasn't for the hip stuff. And it just totally derailed any concept of meeting my goal time. But I wanted to finish the race by the cut time. I knew that the racing company that this was, if you made it to the turnaround station within the cut time, they'd give you the finish. But there was an official finish, and I'm like, I'm gonna finish before that, even though I know they'll give me a medal, even though I know they'll record my time if I exceed the cutoff time. I want to finish by the cutoff time. And so I ran the sections that I was able to run. I didn't feel like it. It hurt the whole time. This was a race that forbid headphones. So really it was me in pain, and that was the companion for 6 hours. And the reason they don't allow headphones is it's all single track. And so, you can't hear people coming up behind you and such. So, yeah, there really wasn't anybody else to run with because you aren't able to run next to anybody. And it was just me in pain. And bro, I didn't get the race that I wanted. But when I finished, I realized I really got the race that I needed. Because one of the goals was to be able to understand my wife's chronic pain existence a little better. And it's something to sit there, or not sit there, to run there and be like, I'm choosing to be in pain for the next 6 hours. There's nothing I can do about it. I have to figure out how to play mental games in order to push that to the side and to be able to do what I need to do to finish this off. And it really made me think a lot more about my wife's experience of being a mom in constant pain, and her choosing to choose kindness even when it's a lot easier to snap out of pain at kids, right? Choosing to invest herself in her art business. She's a fantastic artist because she chooses to do that, to use some of her things she's learned to help others as she does some counseling as well. And it really gave me I remember tearing up towards the end, just thinking about how incredibly brave my wife was and how much I respect and appreciate her existence and the way she pushes through what has really been a real bad shake for her. So I wound up finishing in 7 hours and 50 minutes. It's about 10 minutes before the cutoff line. And it was... wound up stopping 2 miles before to tend to a runner who decided to drink a bunch of pickle juice at an aid station and take salt tablets. So don't do that, because everything came back out. And yeah, I kind of followed behind her just to make sure she was okay, for the last couple miles, because she was in rough shape. But hit that 750 mark, and it dawned on me that had I not actually followed those three guys in the middle of that course, I wouldn't have made the cutoff, because my pace was a couple minutes slower than them at that time. And really, it's fitting for life. It's fitting for ultras. Is that I made it to the end. Not just because of me, but because there were other people that, in this case, unwittingly lended a hand. I don't know their names; they'll never know the story. But it made me really thankful, just for the fact that, like, yeah, we're all out there running, but we're in it together. One of the reasons I love the trail community is that time isn't a thing. It's the question of this hurts, and it's kind of crazy that we're out here choosing to do this, but we're all fighting the course together. And I've appreciated that a lot. And then I think that's a good metaphor for life, right? Like we just don't become the best version of ourselves without other people. I'm sure you can think of people who've invested in you deeply, who've made you who you are. I know I certainly can. I try to be that kind of person to my students professionally, and then also with the counseling side of things. But I find ultras to be a really good metaphor for life. And at the end of the day, when I finished that, I thought, I've run 50K. I've done something that most people aren't crazy enough to try, and I finished it. And no one can ever take that away from me. And I'm really grateful to have done it. And, since then, it's let me actually reflect. I've reflected at times when things are really tough around our household because of just the 800-pound gorilla that is chronic pain and illness that's in our home. Like, if I can choose to endure that physically, I can also choose to endure some other stuff mentally and emotionally. And we are more in control of ourselves than we think, oftentimes, with our responses to suffering. And so the first 50K was not pretty. My wife laughed at me and she said, "You're going to do another one of these, aren't you?" And 2 days later, I was on Ultra sign up and wound up finding another race locally, or 2 hours away, which I did last Saturday. And sure enough, it took a solid 6 weeks for my hip to feel okay. Did a lot of and it set me on a course of I need to do more strength training, which I really didn't do much of. Specifically targeting just weak points in my particular gait and muscle group patterns. And the second one went a lot better than the first one. But it's a learning experience. So there you go. There's the, you probably know more now about that ultra than any other human being on earth. And I don't even know how interesting it is, but there's my first ultra story. And I survived and didn't have a medical event and didn't have to get driven back to the start line. And sometimes those things happen, but I was so thankful to actually be able to complete it.
Yeah, man. Thank you for sharing your story, Nate. It was fantastic. It's a fantastic story. And I appreciate how vulnerable you've been sharing, your feelings and thoughts throughout the race, just with your physical pain, but then thinking about your wife and how that was a metaphor for life and has helped you understand her. That's fantastic. My mom has developed chronic pain recently, lupus, and I have a friend who is dealing with chronic pain as well. And yeah, it's something you can't imagine, but man, waking up and feeling pain.
Yeah.
All the time.
I'm so sorry to hear that about your mom, man.
Oh my goodness.
I'm so sorry to hear that about your mom. It's a journey to be the spouse or to be a loved one, a son of someone, and to watch someone else suffer and you not be able to do a thing about it is a really, really hard thing to wrap your head around. So I'm sorry that that's a path that you have to walk there too.
It's difficult, and it's more difficult for her, just like it's more difficult for your wife. But man, strong people. being able to
Yeah.
put up with that pain and push through it. It's mind blowing. Thank you for sharing. It's fantastic. Yeah, and then you went and ran another one, and it went way better.
Mhm.
I wish we had time. We're pushing hour and 10 here. I don't think we have time for another one. But would you say that the biggest takeaway and thing that made your next what were the biggest things? You could give us a couple points of like
Yeah.
that made that next 50K so much better. What made the difference?
The first was just my attitude coming into it, which was, I know I can do this, right? I know what it's going to take. I know I can do this. And it
Mm-hmm.
was an easier race. It was a rail trail, so it's completely flat. There were 800, it was a total 800-foot elevation change, but it was
Way
just
less.
groomed, like crushed, decomposed granite
Mm-hmm.
trail. I did run the fastest quarter mile I've ever run during an ultra in it, as there was a black biting fly that decided I was going to be its meal. And I was pretty sure I didn't want it to be its meal, and it chased me for a quarter mile. So bring bug spray was the lesson I learned on that one. Yeah, but I think just that attitude of like, I've done this before, I can do it. My longest training run for that one was 15 miles, and yet it went really well. I think another thing I learned was how to manage my body. So I paced it really well and ran a negative split on it. And in the last 10 miles, I think I passed upwards of 20 people. Just because I was still running and most of them weren't. But it was because of the lessons that I learned in the first one of being able to set a pace and then to just kind of tell myself this hurts. It was the stiffness pain. It wasn't, I didn't suffer the same hip pain. It's like, this is uncomfortable, but it's supposed to be uncomfortable right now. If I'm not running because it's uncomfortable, like, what am I doing? You can run in discomfort. And that really changed the game. My time wasn't any better, or wasn't that much better. I actually spent about 20 minutes tending to a downed runner who forgot about electrolytes and wound up having to have some park rangers come and help him.
Wow.
But that's more important than a time, right, to take care of somebody. So there were a couple other guys that were really helpful taking care of him as well. But yeah, it was a race that I'm like, I showed up, I know what I'm doing, I know how to do this, I know how to manage my body, and it wound up being really fun. Started at 6 p.m., ended at 1:30 in the morning, and I'd do it again.
Awesome. Man, thanks for sharing those tips and what changed the game for you that second round. I'm glad it went so well. Glad you felt better about it, and good for you for helping a brother out. That would be so scary to be that person.
Yeah.
So awesome. Final question for you, Nate. Well, no, I gotta ask you too. What's coming up in your life, in your running life? Do you have anything else on the calendar? Are you thinking about
Yeah.
something else?
So at my seminary, there's about half a dozen of us. No, there's about a dozen of us that do ultras and things like that. And so we're actually doing a totally off the books, unofficial backyard ultra at a trail near our area. And
Nice.
we'll start at 8 in the morning and bring a headlamp, and we'll see how long people go. But that should be fun. A lot of us have always wanted to try that format.
Okay,
Just being
and go as
different.
long as you can on
Yeah,
a
so
loop.
it's the you do one loop, 4.17 mile loop per hour. And so if you finish in 48 minutes, you get a 12-minute break. If you finish in 55 minutes, you get a 5-minute break. And it's just a last man standing or last woman standing kind of event. So we've got some really talented runners coming for it. My goal is to hit 50 miles, which would be 12 loops. And we'll see if that happens.
That is awesome, dude. And when did you say that? When did you say that is?
That's in September.
September. Got some
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I hope to do some off the book stuff too. Just make it fun. Do some adventuring with some friends. That's cool.
Yeah, it's good. It helps keep the fun in a sport.
Yeah, not keeping it too serious all the time with planned events that you paid for. I like it. Final question for real is what final advice would you give that runner that's listening to this right now that hasn't maybe signed up for their ultra yet, but they're interested, they think they want to do it. What final advice would you give someone in that situation?
Yeah. I think it would be, don't pin everything on your race. Right? Like, the first ultra attempt is just part of the running journey. And like, I think of that guy that I wound up helping at this most recent race. He was crumpled in a heap on the side of the road, cramping, struggling to remember like his phone password and his wife's name. One of the things he said is like, I trained so much for this. I just trained in the morning. I didn't train in the heat. And I made a mistake by doing that. And I walked away from that thinking, you know what? Like, he tried something that almost no one tries. And that's not really failure. I think when we're scared of failing, we wind up selling ourselves short because we don't wind up attempting things that we might actually be able to do. And so I'd say if you're kind of on the fence, sign up for it, put in the work. And if it doesn't go well, it doesn't define you, right? Come back and try again. And that's entirely part of growth as a human being. And it's okay. Because DNFing a race is something that everybody does at some point. And there's no shame in doing that. There's really only shame in letting your fear of embarrassment or failure stop you from doing something that maybe you can actually do.
Well said, man. Well said. Thanks for sharing your story today, Nate, for sharing your tips and just everything you've said. This has been a deep and reflective episode that I really appreciate. I really appreciate these types of conversations in my life.
So much
so
for
thanks,
having me
thanks. Yeah, thanks for being that person. And yeah, if you're open to it, I don't know if do you have a Strava account where you share what runs? Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing your Strava account with the like in the show notes, and I could stick it in there after?
Yeah, absolutely.
And people could follow you, see what you're doing.
Yep, people can be blown away by my incredible averageness.
Yeah, there's some other incredibly average person out there that needs to see that.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's
sure.
the idea.
We can share that.
Sweet. Well, thanks, Nate. Thanks for your time, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, bro.
Hey, your host Brendan here. I just wanted to thank you personally for listening to today's episode. As someone preparing for my own first ultramarathon, I've found these conversations to be super valuable, and I hope they are for you as well. Whether you're listening on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or somewhere else, make sure to follow or subscribe so you know when the next episode comes out. Also, make sure you check out the show notes of this episode. There's a link to sign up for the Ordinary to Ultra email newsletter, to join our Facebook and Strava groups where you can meet other people striving to run their first ultra marathon, and see any links that our guests may have provided as well. Thanks again, and we'll catch you in the next episode.